Welcome, everyone. This is Illiterate. This week we are covering All Quiet on the Western Front, the new Netflix film. Man, I just checked it out. I'm pretty breathless. I'm hanging out with my buddy Taylor.
I looked into the story after the story.
This is an incredible episode. We're kind of back to the basics here. This is a pretty obvious one, adaptation, 100 years almost in between the two. And I just watched one of the most affecting films of the year. It's one of the most detailed films I've seen in years. And I'm just speechless in a lot of ways. So I'm stoked to dig into this because I know here we are living it, the title. I don't know anything about the source material. So this was incredible to digest. I was pretty struck right off the bat by some pretty overt thematics and generally what I thought the film was trying to say. It's grisly, it's affecting, it's haunting. This is up there with the best for sure.
Yeah. Well, the original is the original war film, so that's why if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
The book and movie started a whole genre of veterans after the war writing about their experiences authentically.
Which is so interesting, too, and this isn't far removed from Sam Mendes's 1917, centered around
World War I.
Centered around the same conflict. So now I was struck really, really immediately to be able to have something just as beautiful, just as breathtaking and deeply detailed on the other side. Because we have so few of those stories, and I instantly then was thinking like, oh, I'm so happy that I'm getting to do this with a pre-Third Reich German story. We focus on the Nazis. We'll get to speaking about some of that things, but this was the perfect German story to bring to an audience and a gravitas like this. I felt lucky almost.
Well, and what's also, this is the first German version of this story. The book that everybody reads in high school is a translation written by a German author after World War I, and he fought in Germany for Germany during World War I. So to have that added layer of different perspective, as opposed to an American film about Americans winning wars,
right.
it is. That's also why it's very affecting, and the anti-war message behind it.
Which I don't know if I want to play my cards too quick here, but like that connected immediately. The title connected immediately into what I saw the film was trying to say in the first scenes, in the way that we are introduced to our main characters before I even meet them, really. And in the scene I am meeting them, I understand exactly what their purpose really is, what the overarching story really is. It's much more than just their story. This is a meditation on a machine that is like an instrument, breathing air through it. That's what and again, this is one of the most affecting movies that I've seen this year in particular because of the score. The score is enigmatic and guttural and strange, almost in a way, conflicting with what you would assume going into a movie like this might have. It connects right into what I'm saying about this idea of a machine. An instrument. And the air blowing through that instrument is the literal breath of these soldiers. That's what I was thinking in the opening sequence.
When talking about sort of a bigger machine and the hopelessness of it, the main character dies, and that's
spoiler.
100-year spoiler. The situation that gets added to this newer one, which is drawing either praise or criticism, is this secondary story higher up, the generals and lieutenants and whoever involved in creating the armistice. When is the war going to end? Nowhere is this in the book or the other film versions. And some people might say, that it undercuts the point of the book, that it is about this lowly soldier lacking any sense about what's going on, and the mindless brutality, no sense of you're just in the trenches. But then when you come out,
I get that.
Yeah.
But yet the film closes with what I think is the answer to all of that, of saying, well, how useless and pointless some of this conflict actually was. They're fighting for mere yards that did not amount to anything. And you don't really get the impact of that unless you see the people disconnected from the boots on the ground conflict talking about that. I think without The end cards, yeah, it would be a little bit disjointed, but the end cards to me totally answer the armistice plot here. It's like this is the above board red tape nonsense that goes on. Meanwhile, this is happening,
Yeah.
and the cognitive dissonance between the two.
Yeah, so it's definitely a different take, and they added that, and I think that the armistice thing shows more of what happened, which we'll get into, with what was going on the time the book was written and thereafter, the story after the story,
Yeah,
because now we have that context 90 years plus later of when, since it was written and the movie was made, that this armistice gutted the German military. This is a quote from the movie you saw. They're saying if peace spurs more misery than war, the German people will resent it. And then here comes the Nazi Party and the Second World
right.
War following this beaten down sentiment. So it is something that hadn't happened yet to a degree, was happening when this story
Right.
was originally conceived, but now we see, oh, this is what it yielded. And so a modern filmmaker is adding that piece to it, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I was intrigued to learn that that wasn't part of the original. But I think that's exactly right. We have the benefit of 90 years now, and how many more conflicts to think and study. If the machine is it still true? Do what we said 100 years ago about this thing? Is it still this? I think that's worth that's worth a new stab at it. That's worth adding a new piece to. I think that those end cards are just gutting, man.
Right, because the original book and film was touted as, oh, perhaps this will prove that war is pointless and this will end it. In the meantime, evil
I
lurks, and yeah.
I remember it closing out and then, pontificating on just the idea that the main character dies and how rare that is
Yeah.
until 17 million people lost their lives in the conflict of World War One. It comes up on the
Yeah.
screen and I go, yeah, well, it's probably more likely that this is the story that
Yeah.
you would know. This is more likely than the ones that made it through. It's like
Yeah.
this is the so I as soon as I had that thought and then that appears on the screen, it really shuts you up.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's jump into who it didn't shut up, the person who actually
Gosh.
experienced this, and the weaving path that he takes through writing and history unfolding. Like I said, it boggles my mind because it is so hard to conceptualize. It seems so long ago and not so long ago, but here he is responding to something, being involved in something, and all the little tidbits about that I certainly didn't know.
Yeah.
That really, hopefully, will get. If you do like this film, if it does mean something to you, here's what here's what actually
Yeah. Yeah.
happened
Yeah.
in real life, not just this conflict portrayed. Eric Marie Remarque, and the second and third name there were changed. Marie was his mother's name, whom he
Hmm.
loved, who he changed to honor her, and then Remarque I'll get to in a second. This was published in late 28 in two parts in a newspaper and went out as a
Hmm.
book in 1929. Eric had served in World War I, had been writing since he was 16, and he was 30 in 29 when the book was published,
Okay.
and was the best-selling book of that year in America and certainly other places worldwide. This is, because I know I'm throwing around a lot of dates, 10 years after the armistice, after the end of what this book and
Okay.
film is proposing. So he's seen what's happened to veterans, his experience, how shell shocked people were, what was the point of it. Something is on the rise in the country that I live in and I don't like it.
Hmm.
What can I say about my experience? So, just an odd tidbit about it. Like I said, he'd been writing a bunch, and after the war, got a technical writing job for Continental Tire, which published a comic series in their magazine. And it just reminded me like how Dune was published by
Oh
Chilton,
my
the
gosh.
auto
Yeah.
repair manual people.
Oh my god.
So it's kind of
Yes.
funny that there's a similar weird start to
Oh
his
my god.
writing career as well
Yeah.
after the war. And then the strongest voices, as I said, things coming into the to bear in the 30s, early 30s, the strongest voices against this coming out are the Nazi Party as it's rising, saying, oh, it denigrates the war effort, it exaggerates what happened, it villainizes Germany. It's all of the things that they're not for. Uh, Even though in the opening of the book he's saying it's not a anti-Germany statement. It's the what happened to individual young men
Right.
who bought along. They were not, a lot of them, conscripted. They said, "Oh, I want to fight for this. What is
Right.
this even?" And so, yeah, when the party rises in 33, this book becomes one of the first publicly burnt books, and all the private
Good God.
versions are to be handed over to the Gestapo. He was
Good
on
God.
the hit list for the Nazis.
That writer and his stories.
Yeah. Yeah, not good. Not good. Giving people ideas. Which one of the
Good
things
God.
then comes into the Nazi propaganda around him. So his name he changed to Remark with a QUE at the end. It was originally Remark,
Hmm.
Remark, but he
Hmm.
changed it to honor his French ancestry and to distance himself from the other things that he had worked on publishing before this
Okay.
book came out. And so the Nazi propaganda that they were trying to propose around him was that his real name was Kramer, which is Remark spelled backwards, and that he was Jewish, and that he did not serve in World War I, and all of it was a fraud, which
Whoa.
is kind of
Whoa.
a,
Whoa.
like, if you want to get into the people that love twisty conspiracies, it's like, no, his name was actually backwards and it was Jewish.
Yeah.
It just feels conspiracy enough to be true, and that was what they were hoping
Okay.
to do. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it really affected him in the moment, really right after, the few years after this is happening. The night of the burnings, he got wind of this and fled to Switzerland
Yeah.
because they're going to come
Yeah.
after him,
Uh-huh.
and then stayed there until he went to the US in 39 before
My
things really
ideas. They
go
want me
off
for
for
my
World War II.
ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
What you got in your head there is contraband.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, especially to the militaries. So it wasn't just Germany. The Austrian military banned it, and so did Czechoslovakia. They didn't want, because, like I said, it reached out beyond just Germany. It was like, oh no, this is, what if any soldier gets their hands on this? They won't want to be involved
It's
in
kind of
anything.
interesting how the most like neutral, like it's not like the book is not like you are wrong. The book is this is wrong. it's,
Yeah.
it's almost like the insecure party
Yeah.
responsible for is then acting out in response to
Yeah.
pointing the finger back at themselves inadvertently.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's moths to a flame.
Moss to a flame. The unfortunate thing, though, he's gone. He's in the US, so he's not privy to anything going on in
Mm.
his homeland during World War II. His family is still there, and
Oh
so
no,
he
no!
doesn't.
Why?
Yeah, he doesn't know anything about them until after.
Oh my god!
And this is, yeah, it's not a happy episode right now,
No!
but his brother-in-law became a prisoner of war. His stepmom committed suicide,
Oh my god!
and the Nazis arrested his youngest sister, and she was a part of resistance movements. She was found guilty of undermining morale. It was said that they said, essentially, your brother is beyond our reach, but you won't escape us. And they beheaded her in
Oh
43.
my god!
And so, like I said, he didn't know about any of this until after. Yeah, he was supremely affected by the message, his words, his ideas. Uh,
Jeez.
yeah, yeah. Interestingly, it did not stop him. He wrote 11 more novels, mostly war
Boom.
related,
Yes.
before his death in 1970. Yeah. Just to connect to Hollywood and the film stuff now, he also was, like, somewhat aware of Hollywood, big in Hollywood. He had relationships with Hedy Lamarr, Marlene Dietrich, these big German actresses
Oh yeah.
that were also in the silent early sound era of the time.
Wow.
Uh, and so he was in the Hollywood scene, which leads us to the production of the original film. Did you ever see this? I did not.
No, I don't believe.
Yeah. It's right about the same length as this new one. So
Really?
it's pretty epic,
Wow.
and it's
Yeah.
pre-code, so it really hits
Gosh.
hard. Won 2 Academy Awards, basically the best picture one for the time and director.
Yeah.
And Spielberg credits it for inspiring Saving Private Ryan, and like I
Yeah.
said, it's the big, oh, this is what a war movie, war story is.
Yeah.
like the Dune tie-in. There's a weird tie-in to our Nollywood episode, which I
Really?
had to go back and look at
Oh,
to
no.
remind myself. We had talked about in that time, we were talking about bootlegging and copying things and who owns the rights to the DVDs and all of that
Yes,
world.
yes, yes, yes. The
Um,
entire black
yeah,
market
and yeah, piracy and all of that. And
piracy. Yeah.
we had mentioned this had started from the very beginning of film in Hollywood, and producers were trying to get away from Edison and his patents. And this guy Carl Laemmle founded the Universal Film Manufacturing Company, which then becomes
Mm.
Universal Pictures. And
Oh,
this is the start of Universal and the sound, and he's in
Lord.
charge, him and his son, for all the monster movies, and he's
Wow.
huge. uh
Wow.
he retained deep ties with his family and friends in Germany. He's German born and immigrated to the US, and so before everything goes down, he traveled to Berlin to meet with Eric Remarque and buy the rights to the book. And
Wow.
so he was heavily invested in getting this thing made.
Yeah.
And then, of course, later Nazi propaganda was trying to say that Remarque was swindled out of the deal by Jewish producers in Hollywood. And
What?
not that it's like, no, this is an actual German immigrant who wanted this made also in America. Like I said, such a strong message. Carl Laemmle was convinced, yes, this movie is going to turn the world away from destroying humanity. War is, as we know it, on its last legs because of what we've seen and what this is going to do. And
Right.
then here comes the screenings of this thing. They get it made, and a few weeks prior to the first screening in Germany, the National Socialist German Workers' Party gets 107 seats, which is Adolf Hitler's party,
Oh,
which then
no.
becomes the Nazis. It's now the second largest in the country. So, like I said, the rumblings are going. These ideas are resonating with folks during the Great Depression, that these treasonous revolutionaries are to blame for Germany's defeat and decline, and the sentiment is rising. And so
Mm.
that's just a few weeks prior to this screening. So then in 1930, the first screening in December, there's a heavy police presence. Nobody's applauding. They're moved, but what can anybody do? Whose side
Oh,
is
my
the police on
God.
at this point?
Oh, this is
And
terrifying.
yeah, the second screening of the film had huge protests, mob attacks, uh, yelling, Judenfilm, that this is a Jewish film. It seems like somewhat pranky that they have sneezing powder and putting mice into the theater. But then there were also people beating those of Jewish descent in
Good
the audience
God.
in the streets. This is all manufactured by Goebbels, who then becomes the propaganda minister of the Nazi Party. And
Yeah.
this
Okay.
specific incident he writes about with great delight
My
in his diary. That
God.
that such early mayhem, and the police are powerless and they're not going to do anything, and
Oh, my God.
the protesters are on our side. So yeah, it's just like this film, this idea, this story is integral to certainly not the cause, but it's
Yeah.
it's it's in response, and it's proving the point that,
It's
hey,
inciting a reaction
yeah,
from those who feel guilty in their souls.
and want what they want. And then just the last little bit of history with this and the film and the Hollywood side. Carl Laemmle is continuing to promote the film, even though Germany is having nothing to do with it. In 34, he travels to Vienna to request that the chancellor lift the ban,
What?
because Austria, as I said, they didn't like the book for their military, and so they're also not showing the film. And the chancellor politely refuses, but even still, a few days later, literally a few days after Karl is
Wow.
there trying to vie for it, insurgents storm the chancellery and they assassinate the chancellor of Austria. The
Oh, my God.
Nazi insurgents do. So
Oh, my
it's
God.
yeah, it's so it's so interwoven to
It
the political
is.
side of things coming through. Yeah, I knew none of that, and it means so much more than when you see why they might add the armistice side of things and say, well, what's happening after this? What is this going to do to people? Because now we see.
Yeah.
But it literally was in the moment too, as as the film was being made, as the book was gaining popularity, it was being destroyed.
Well, it's
Uh,
funny, because we've seen this in other movies. I mean, I think what was the Gary Oldman Churchill movie,
mhm,
Darkest Hour?
mhm.
It has some play between their planning, what's going on, like all of these war movies. We have seen that type of thing before, where the people above board are disconnected from the conflict on the ground, but all of that comes all after everything that All Quiet on the Western Front inspires.
Yeah.
And so we've had 90 years of movies and what we now think a war movie is. It's almost interesting that All Quiet on the Western Front had that almost, I'm using cliche because I don't have a better term for it, but that cliche, and inserted it back into this one. And this is the war story to inspire and incite all of these other stories. It
Mhm.
doesn't have that element that all these other stories end up having, really. This becomes a very common element in war film that now
Yeah.
All Quiet on the Western Front has acquired it as well. And because 90 years have passed from the first question of like, well, this machine is wrong. 90 years have passed. Are all of those questions about that still applicable? I think it makes it tonally appropriate for you to want to put the armistice back in, or not back in, but put the armistice in, because that really contextualizes what's happening. And really, it doesn't pull me out of how lost those troops are on the
Mhm.
ground. It shows me that now, it speaks to me that decades and decades and decades, 100 years after this conflict, that we've learned very little about how our actions affect one another and how and the
Yeah.
nature of war itself. We seem to be unwilling to change.
Well, yeah, yeah, you bring that to bear with what you're saying too. It made me think the story of the just the boys in the trenches was not enough for, or
Right.
it seemed it was
Right.
going to be enough, and the Nazi party said, "No, thank you.
Yeah.
This is too powerful.
Yeah.
We're not gonna have people learn this lesson." And so then, yeah, it's like adding this other piece, the higher up piece is like, yeah, the people that do have the control to sway these things, maybe that side of it will show you how fruitless it all is too. It's
These are
not
the
just,
people who
yeah.
need to be watching the movie. At the end of the day, we need our leaders to see themselves in these places,
Yeah,
because
not
this is the
just,
same story. It hasn't
yeah.
changed, and that's what I saw. It's the same story. It hasn't changed, and there are some guilty parties among us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The sentiment towards the soldiers did not end with this, though. Like I said, he wrote 11 other books. The very next one, the same year the film came out, is called The Road Back, and of course
Lord.
burned and banned in Germany. But this is about other members
Hey,
of
that
that
might take
company.
that as a seal of like success. Total, that might as well be total praise. It was the most
Oh yeah,
hailed, like they hate it that much, just flip it and be like, well, that means in their love language, they loved
yeah. It spoke to them horribly.
it. Yeah, it
Because
made
it was
them feel
about
so
other,
bitterly
yeah,
guilty.
yeah. It was about other members of the company coming back into civilian life, the road back,
Lord,
and
yeah, yeah.
how society even had failed them,
Oh
and
my
how
God,
cynical
yeah,
you could be, not
yeah,
just in the trenches, but then, okay, here comes everybody. What's even happening now? And so what
man.
the last weird bit of history with this is, this also got a film, but that didn't happen until 37. But
Hmm.
by this point, there's too much pressure from Germany, the Nazi party, boycotts, and so they switch directors, heavily re-edit and reshoot it,
Oh
and
no.
it is a shell of anything that the book
Mm,
actually was. But I just found that interesting, that it's like
yeah.
the sequel, the book happened, the film, but it's within history that the actions of history are dictating what this media is becoming, because of, well, it's speaking to what's happening now. It wasn't actually about that, but now it's happening again. And what
That's the
uh
urgency of relevancy. I mean, if
yeah.
it's happening now, we're speaking about it now, and that means the forces that be are acting upon it now.
Yeah.
That's a pretty that's a pretty hefty thing, that not everything has that urgency. Uh,
Yeah.
not everything has that kind of pressing relevancy, or that pressing pushback, because you are in the midst of it.
Yeah.
There's very rare. I'm struggling to come up with some other examples. I know there definitely are, but like this is a context that needs to be fully appreciated.
Yeah. Well, it makes you want to look to things where, like, this film is like, is anybody particularly furious about this film? I don't really think so, in the sense of it's a, because it's about World War I, ostensibly 100 years ago, 90 years ago, and so people don't maybe they don't have the same
Yeah,
context. But
exactly.
like you're saying, if you look at stuff that's coming out, what is getting people upset, or what is split 50-50,
Mhm.
and it's the best-selling book in America and it's burned elsewhere and it's banned from the military in these other places. Like that's the kind of stuff I think that you're getting at, where it's like
Right.
that's what I
Yeah.
certainly didn't know about this. I knew it was about World War I. I didn't know it was about World War II also.
Right, right, that it bridges the gap really, that it's intrinsically linked into this conflict, but gosh,
Yeah.
this is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
One thing that struck me, it's because I started the film, I think it had my settings on Netflix to the dub, but I didn't realize it for a little bit. And then I realized that I hadn't realized it for so long. And then I started looking at the scenes and I flipped over to the subs. And then I flipped back to the dub and I started looking at it because I work in this field. If you've listened to the show for long enough, you might have picked up this. But I was really taken aback by the dub. The dub is casted incredibly well. It's timed perfectly, and I got a lot out of it. And I went back and forth between the two because I didn't realize, I had forgotten or didn't even realize what side of the story I was on for the first few minutes.
uh-huh.
I really had no idea because I wasn't hearing German. I was just the movie had started. So like I had to recontextualize about 3 or 4 minutes in or whatever, and go, okay, right, this is that. Oh, okay, got you. And then I started thinking about the voices, and I started thinking about everything that we've spoken about today about adding the armistice line, is that muddling how lost the soldiers feel. Well, I mean, I started looking at the rest of the film like, well, could I watch this and have no idea what side is what?
Yeah.
Because that does not matter, because that is the point. Because this is not a anti-American, this is ultimately strictly about, I said it earlier, about this isn't about you are wrong, this is about this is wrong.
Yeah.
And so it just instantly it cut through all of the right and wrong and the political nonsense, barren to this is wrong. And I really appreciated that. This is wrong, and this is the machine. Who's feeding it? I thought that was fantastic, and I lost myself in the humanity of it. The dub is
Yeah.
like British English, so for 5 minutes I'm going like, but 1917 just came out.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like when I realize that, I go, this is the point. This is it. This is it, because they're humans. Because it's a human story. It's the ultimate war humanization story. Because the sides do not matter. It is not about pointing fingers. You, them,
Mhm.
us. It's this. This is wrong.
Mhm.
What have we done about it in 90 years? That's God. the titles roll 17 million lives lost in that one conflict alone.
Yeah.
I really behoove everybody to check this out. Give it a wonder. If you don't want to watch the German version, I just gave some praise to that dub. The British English, everything is really casted. I went back several times throughout the movie and looked at sequences that I was like, this is okay. It's not. It tricked me. I mean, and I do this work. So I really want to give some props up to that and throw that out there. That's a perfectly digestible, good way to get into this content if watching a German film isn't up your alley. But yeah, just check this out over the holiday season. This might be some good introspective, some really rich, educational, human soul, soul nutritious content for you. And we'll be looking at it for the Oscars, no doubt.
It's Germany's submission.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Again, that score, oh my gosh. Thank you, Taylor, for all the
Yeah.
incredible work this week. Guys, thank you for hanging with us. We really appreciate it. Reach out to us. Let us know what you're reading. Let us know what you're watching. Let us know what you're excited for. You never know when we'll do an episode on that thing you want to know all about. Get in touch with us. @illiteratepod@gmail.com. @illiteratepod on Instagram. And until next week, stay safe, and we'll talk at you then.
See you then.